Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Speaking of Gas. I've been off this for a while, but I think I've got everything in place and I put that noisy phone in the drawer, so hopefully we won't be interrupted by that again. Before I get started, I will tell you that as we go, if you have questions, there is a question and answer box. And if you look at the lower right-hand side of your screen, there's 9 dots in a square, and that's the meeting tools. And if you open that, you'll find the question and answer selection. So if you want to ask questions, type them in at any time, and at the end, we'll take a look at that. So speaking of gas, I know we have some new people on here. It's a look at what matters to you, the owner of oil and gas rights in Pennsylvania, brought to you by the GasWellGuru. And my job is educating and advocating for the landowner. The webcast is recorded and can be viewed on my YouTube channel, and all my previous recordings are up there as well. So this week, I've got 2 things to talk about. I'm sure it'll wander into a few other ones, but I'm going to start with the March production report, which came out on the 15th, so about 7 days ago. And I'm going to share a section of it, which is the top 25 wells from that report. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. It's a ranking 1 to 25 statewide of the producing wells. And this is a report that I create from the raw data that comes off from the state and from DEP. They're required to report this for unconventional wells monthly, and it comes out on the 15th. Now, I just downloaded this, so it was fresh yesterday, and there were only, I think, 21 wells that were not reported at that time. So it's and they were pretty insignificant. It's a very complete report, so I don't anticipate that we're missing any. In the same section where you select for this report on DEP, there's a place to click on unreported wells. And that'll tell you if a company if they're late in reporting, if you're missing a lot of data. And a lot of times you can tell that quickly by looking at how many producing wells there are. For March of 2025, there are 13,317 active wells, and 12,003 of those are producing. This is the top 25, and the information you see here, and I've pared this down a bit and then added in a column. That MMCF, that's million cubic feet per day column, is a calculation that I add in there. The MCF that each well produces is in 2 columns before it. March 2025 MCF. That's the total it produced in that period. Now, if a well is not producing the entire period, you'll see that here. For instance, the Gregerson in Susquehanna County produced for 26 days. And so that could mean that they've turned it off for some reason for 4 or 5 days, or it just came online. And you can know that if it's a particular interest to you by looking at the cumulative production report for that well. And you'll see there are a few wells down here that have less than the full time. And then the calculation shows that during that period, since it may not be a full 21 days, during that period, how many million cubic feet it produced per day. And in the case of the top well, the Yonkin 6HC, it produced 51 million cubic feet a day. These are, outstanding numbers that we see now. And for reference, early wells might have come in at 1 or 2, 4, 5 million cubic feet a day. And then over the last 20 years, we've increased to these numbers. Keeping in mind, we've also increased the length of the laterals. We've increased the number of frac stages. I mean, this may seem obvious, but it's not that there's more gas down there. It's that they're getting so much better at getting it out. One of the things I'm going to talk about on this particular production report is some coding that's used by one of the companies. And the reason it is interesting, not that you would remember this coding, if you're part of, and it's going to be Chesapeake or now Expand Energy, the reports still say Chesapeake, even though in the merger with Southwestern and Chesapeake, it's now Expand. But they're still calling the wells in the original Chesapeake play Chesapeake, and Southwestern, they're still calling them SWM. So what I'm going to point out here is you'll notice that there are 6 Yonkin wells on this pad, or excuse me, in this report. 6 Yonkin wells on a pad. I'll note that there are actually 7. I went back and looked at that. And one of the wells only produced 16 million a day. So it's not included in this top 25 report. But the interesting thing is, if you look at the coding on these wells, so we have the well name, and then if you follow this regularly, there's always some kind of numbering system for the wells on that particular pad. And so when you look up these wells, all of them start with Yonkin, but then here we have the 6HC, the 5HC, 104HC, 23HC, 121, 22, and then the other one is the, I think maybe I didn't write that down. I didn't. I did make that note on something here, on some paper I had. So that other well, I don't have the name of it. Oh, it's a 21HC. Okay, that is in the lower part of the report that only produced 60 million. So this is a stacked play, and stacked not in the sense of different formations of a different name or grouping, such as, I know way back I did a presentation on stacked plays, and I talked about pads that had a Burkett well, which is in the Geneseo Formation above the Marcellus, and then it had production in the Marcellus, and then 5,000 feet or so below that, production in the Utica. That's also a stacked play. Interestingly, in Susquehanna County, we have a stacked play that's actually all within the Marcellus. And if you look at, so we've got the 6HC and the 5HC on here. Those are the upper part of the lower Marcellus. So there's upper Marcellus and lower Marcellus, and I don't know if it's all cases, but it's separated by a formation in there. And I don't have the name of that on the top of my head, but they're distinct formations within the Marcellus. 6H, single digit followed by HC, is the upper part of the lower Marcellus. Then you've got those that have a double digit, 21, 22, and 23 HC. Those are the lower part of the upper Marcellus, and they have indications of where the sweet spots are. And that's what they're targeting when they drill these laterals and steer that bit out through the formation. Then you'll see we have triple digits. So the Yonkin 104HC, that is drilled in the upper part of the lower Marcellus. However, the distinction there is in these triple digits, that's a multi-unit lateral. So you may not all be aware of what a multi-unit lateral is, but in certain areas that's become very common, where a lateral traverses different or separate units. So it's a multi-unit lateral, and they have Chesapeake gives a designation to that. Now, I'm going to confess, there's someone that's given me the cheat sheet on that, and I have not followed that with any other companies to know what their coding system is, but I'm sure that's the same. The other thing is, a lot of times by whether a lateral is odd or even, it'll tell you whether it's going north or south. But every company is different. That's not anything that's standardized. That's just within the company how that works. And then double or triple digits in the 20s, 121 HC is a multilateral upper Marcellus, and we see that also. So it was a good place to point this out because we did have 6 Yonkin wells in this report, and we could point out those differences. So what this is saying is that on that pad, if they're drilling into all of those formations, if you had upper and lower and possibly 3 there, that those are, each one of those is a distinct wellhead on the pad and has its own distinct separate production. So in a stacked play, this is how you can multiply that production and bring tremendous amount of gas in from one pad. And then couple that with doing these multi-unit laterals, we're talking now of developing a tremendous amount of area also from one pad and reducing that footprint. Now, the footprint that isn't reduced is for the landowner that owns that pad. And maybe too late for some of them, but if you're just leasing, and that's a consideration for you, if you're going to be the person with the pad on your property, maybe you need to build something into that lease, whether it's an increased royalty for you or something for the compensation of having all the activity on you for more wells and more area. New permits for 2025. Stop sharing this. Currently, to date in 2025, there have been 241 permits issued and also 173 area of review summaries filed, which doesn't mean that there's been a permit issued for that area of review summary at this time, but that it's in the system and maybe if it's approved and the company goes forward with it. Comparing that to the last 3 years, in 2024, there were 716 permits issued. In 2023, 881, and in 2022, 1,044. Also of note, in 2025 so far, there's been 127 wells plugged. And the plugged wells typically are wells that were drilled and never put into production. And DEP is saying you've got to plug and abandon those. There's a number of them still out there to be plugged in Tioga County, not as many through other parts of the play. But the one interesting one that popped up to me was the Teal 1. And that one was drilled back in, I want to say 2006, close to that. And that was a well, wasn't called a Marcellus well, but that's where they were headed. And they were testing out the formation at that time, very new. I have an interesting story from that when, working on a landowner group, had a little time to kill before a group meeting, and the company pulled in from one end and I pulled in from another. We had extra time, so we drove out to the Teal well. And now that particular well has been plugged. Nothing else of note there other than, maybe it's just not, it was a vertical well and just not producing enough to make it worth keeping open. And I don't know how it produced over those years. Another thing is, we talk about a lot of numbers that are happening and how do we compare things one year to another. In the political climate, there's been a lot of drill, baby, drill. And, if you want to know what I think about that, I watch the news and, companies that certainly wanted to have an aura out there of drill, baby, drill. Well, they're not necessarily happy with the price of oil being pushed down because of things that are happening globally. And that maybe that's best managed by the companies. In my opinion, they drill what the market will bear. They ride that cycle of high prices, low prices. We want to be energy independent for sure. But if it's in the case of gas, if you're drilling these monster gas wells and there's no place to take it, then we've got to endure the low prices. So it's a very dynamic market. I don't think anybody politically is probably going to have as big an effect on that as what the market will bear. And so we're producing a lot of gas. There are some very hopeful things on the horizon. We see a lot of it in Pennsylvania, where they're looking at these the data centers to support AI and looking at ways to produce enough energy, sometimes right there on site, building natural gas generators that can power these plants and then not take away from the grid, which is very important. So we have an opportunity there to utilize a lot more natural gas right here where it's produced. So that's exciting. So we're seeing fewer permits there, maybe. We might be on track this year. Well, we're almost halfway through the year and there's only 241, which is it's a little less than half of what we had last year. Last year was less than 2023, and that was less than 2022. However, you have fewer permits, but higher production on the wells that are being produced or being completed. We have less rigs, but yet we have shorter drilling times. So advances in technology, sometimes the data looks like it's slowing down when we're actually maybe even ahead of where we were. We just had our POGLA conference in State College, had about 10 speakers. It was a great conference, had some new speakers. One of them was a John Wang from Penn State who specialized in the shale. And something that I took away from his presentation on this very topic was in 2008, it took 20 days to drill 3,000 feet. And it took 4 days to frack just 2 stages. Now it takes about 8 days to drill 10 to 20,000 feet. And you can frack 10 to 15 stages per day. These rigs, they're using electric to frack. So where it was it used to be, a deafening process, a frack job. Now where they're using electric equipment, it's quiet and less emissions. The strides that we've taken are huge. And, we have less pads, bigger pads, more production in a short amount of time. I recently talked to a company person that said they expect to be permitting a 23,000-foot lateral, which they said if somebody doesn't race and do something ahead of them, that it would be the longest lateral in Pennsylvania. And I'm not positive, but I want to say it'll probably be in the Utica. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the area of review summaries, just because I pulled off a number of them and to show some interesting differences on how companies are reporting things and what an area of review summary is. I know I have talked about this before. I think they're interesting. They give landowners a heads up for what's happening out there, and that we didn't have before. So I'm not sure if it's best for you if I zoom this in or out, but I'll go through. These are pulled off from the DEP Area Review Summary report just yesterday, and so they're very current, and these are mostly from the latest ones. There were 173 of these filed since the beginning of the year. I said they're a heads up for you as a landowner. So, you know, if the well's on your property, they're going to show you a location plat, proposed drilling permit, and show you where they intend to drill the well. I'm going to show you where the lateral goes. So if that pad's on your property, you're going to know a lot more than your neighbors sooner, because they need you to sign off on some things, particularly if your lease asks for it, and you should always have that right, because that gives you a little bit of say over what's happening. But if you're not the person who has the well pad on their property, you may not know about anything going on unless you're in one of those neighborhoods that chatters a lot, which is what you really need to do. So an area of review summary, they have to file to show what is in 1,000 feet of the well bore. And one of the biggest things they're looking for there is other wells that are within 1,000 feet that this well bore might impact, or the frac might impact. And it varies. You know, you get way over in Susquehanna County, you don't have a lot of many at all, the old shallow wells, but you do have, you'll see on these reports, a lot of existing horizontal well bores. And so you'll see that on these. But this gives you a heads up, and this shows you where it goes. Now, here's a Repsol. The first one here is a Repsol Area of Review Summary, and these pink lines are the planned well bores. And then they're showing tax parcels within the AOR. The blue line is the area of review, the blue area. So that buffer line is 1,000 feet from the well bore. And so you also need to keep in mind that when you look at this in relation to a location plat, those buffers, those markings and those distances will not be the same delineated on both. And so you have to be aware of that to know what you're actually looking at. This one shows all the parcels. So this is very easy for you to match up with where your parcel is located and how these proposed well bores may impact that. There's no standard for these reports. Okay, this one is, and I'll apologize because I might not be able to tell you what all these are because they're too small for me to see on my screen. Which company this is? Okay, this one is Southwestern, and they actually are using a topographic map to plot it. So you probably know where your property is on there, and you can have an idea if this well bore goes through you or not. It's not, well, okay, so these are parcels here, but I'm seeing state game lands. So here, let's just blow that up a little bit. Okay, so this may be drilled on a private property and drilling over into state, or let's see, game lands. That'd be game lands, not state forest. And that's why I didn't think the parcels were on there. They're just much larger. We don't have all the tiny parcels that we're seeing with this Repsol unit. And you can see the laterals. You see we've got an interesting little jog in that one where they've changed their direction some. That's should be accurate what they propose. Here's another one. This is Pennsylvania General Energy, and theirs is a little different, but there's that 1,000-foot buffer. Interesting that they're drilling out in this way. Now, whether that's a landing point and there's not going to be anything fracked from here to there, this doesn't really tell you that. But it's possible that this is what they're calling a waypoint, like on that other one. Won't know that until more information is published. They're showing another well bore on that, and then telling you that it's plugged. This one was really interesting, and there's no company name on it. But what I did get from that, it was an oddball company that I had never heard of. And it's Laurel Mountain Production, and it's in Butler County. So again, there's no standard form here. This is BKV operating. And again, they've got this orange line around the buffer. It's another well here that was drilled by Southwestern. And that's an existing well. And most of these things will show in the key. Most of these are pretty sophisticated and use the same format. This one, a little less so. But I also think probably we're not going to find the number of wells by Laurel Mountain Production that we will by other companies. This one is Black Hill Energy that's operating over in Bradford County, and there's their 1,000-foot buffer. And this shows the top hole where they've curved and the landing points in this area, and then you would expect that they'll frack along that blue straight line. And then the existing Marcellus laterals are shown in the green here. A lot of these could be old EOG wells. They could be Black Hill as well, but that was an area where EOG was drilling at one time. This one is a Seneca Resources in Tioga County. It's a DCNR 007 pad. Lots of activity over there. They've drilled a lot from this 007 pad. And this one, very nice, shows the parcels, very easy to see if that lateral is going underneath your property. And this one doesn't have, shows the planned lateral, and there are no other existing wells within that area. This one is an Olympus Energy map. This is in the southwest part of the state. A little less information on it. They don't actually show the lateral, but you'll expect that lateral to be right down through the middle between these buffer lines. And they are showing parcel lines on there. So again, easy to identify if this is going to impact you. This one is CNX. They're using the same, maybe they're using the same surveyor to produce these. Oh, Moody. You notice that? It's Moody on both of these that are producing these. And this one does have, see all these dots on this map? Those indicate existing wells. So that's what I'm talking about. You know, the shallow wells, when you get down into the southwestern part of the state where there are a lot of them, if you're looking at that big DEP state map, these would all be in blue. And then this was very interesting. Let me back out to show the whole thing. This shows a proposed lateral here with a buffer around it. And I don't know, let me blow it up and see for myself if, let's see, other Mingo lateral. Okay, so these are other laterals, but they may not be drilled yet. Some of these file a separate area of review summary for each lateral. Some of them, if you noticed in prior ones, showed multiple laterals and then that 1,000-foot buffer going out around all of them, and apparently both things are acceptable. But these may all just be proposed, not actually drilled. But again, it's Southwest Pennsylvania, so you're seeing existing wells. You know, they ask, will small parcels be included in a unit? This is not a unit map. However, when the unit maps are filed, all these small parcels would be included. Now, it's very possible, this is a big subdivision where the rights were severed before all these houses were, I'm going to assume these are all houses, were built, and so they may not own their oil and gas rights under it. But if they do, then you would have leases for all these small parcels. Once at a narrow conference in the western part of the country, I asked an XTO division order analyst that was at a booth, what's the largest number of royalty owners you've ever had in a unit? And she told me 3,000. And so when you look at something like this, let's say they did all own their rights. Now you can get units that would have many, many, many royalty owners in it. But you can't really assume that by looking at these maps. And then this one, I'm getting down towards the bottom. I just wanted to show you a big variety of these. This is EQT. And on this, they showed the parcels. And this is great because what I'm going to say about EQT is that when they file their unit declaration, they're probably not going to put those parcels on there. And so you're going to have a hard time figuring out, other than their spreadsheet they file with it, what your actual interest in this well is. So this is a great tool for you if you are a EQT lessor, to be able to understand where your property is in relation to the well bore. This one is very busy. BKV operating. This is the Rourke and Washington Township, Wyoming County. So this is up in the Northeast, and it's showing all the parcels, and it's also showing a number of existing wells that you'll see. Actually, oh, there it is. Offset wells, the well bore, 1,000-foot offset, uppermost and lowermost perforations drilled, well bore path. Not the typical information you see on some of the other ones. Again, this is BKV, same county. Actually, same well. They're showing some detail here. And this is the first time I've seen a page 2 with more detail. But here you go. Here's all these individual parcels. I'm guessing since they're delineating these like this, that it may be that the rights are owned by them individually, but that's just an assumption. So there you go. There would be a unit with a lot of people sharing in that. And, you know, I'll say with these, we've looked at some like the Yonkin pad that we looked at in the production report. Each one of those laterals is separate production. When a well's producing 50 million cubic feet a day, even if you have a small parcel, it could be enough information on a monthly basis to make it interesting, make it worth going to the mailbox and the bank. And then this one is a range resources well. And I'm just going to say, in the tradition of range resources, they're not going to give you all the information they could, because so this shows it on a topographic map. And so you know where you're located in there. You can probably figure out if how those well bores might impact you. But unfortunately, when they file their location plat, it's going to be a line through a blank page with coordinates at the ends. And when they file their unit declaration, it's going to be the same. And so our Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Landowner Alliance is actually working on that legislation this year to make some requirements what they have to file in unit declarations. And we really also need to be looking at what they have to publish as a location plat with DEP, because the information is available. In order for them to not publish it, they've really got to take it out. And I believe that you as a landowner are entitled to that information. You should be able to look at the documents that are filed with DEP and filed in the courthouse and be able to tell how these wells intersect your property and how your gas is going to be commingled with other royalty owners. And I believe that they have a fiduciary responsibility to produce that and make it available to you. So that, I think I touched on all the information that I wanted to cover in there. Before I get to the Q&A, I'll just say I want to really thank everyone for joining me today. I had more on here than we have had in the past, which is great. I apologize for the long interval with no webcast. Lots of things get busy in life when you've got 14 grandchildren. And also our Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Landowner Alliance has really ramped up operations in the last year. We've never gone away, but we have a lot of new members on our board. We have a new board president and officers that are working hard to represent, bring education and advocacy to you. And so that's taken a lot of time as well to move that along. And so those are all my excuses for not being on for a period of time. All my webcasts are on YouTube. If you're a subscriber, when I do plan to do a webcast, I will send out an email like I did and one in the morning to remind you and give you the link again. Same link every week. And also, if there's something that you'd like to hear about, let me know. I will be doing paid videos to learn how to do certain things. But, you know, this is just, I'm here to kind of talk about what's interesting in oil and gas. So with that, I'd say also consider joining POGLA. It's a really important organization to you, whether you know it or not. This year, you were able to deduct, for last year, depletion allowance on your Pennsylvania return, and that's because of us. So now let me take a look at the questions in here and see if I have any answers to them. Okay, curious if you have looked into some of these wells and how long they've been producing at this high level. Some were spud almost 2 years ago, but of course, not sure when they went into production. And that's a good question. If you'll know, when I had that report up there, that I did include the column that shows when the wells were spud. And for those of you that might not know, the spud date, which is the last column, that's when the drilling began. Now that means that they broke ground with it. That doesn't mean that they completed in any particular time frame. So if you look at that first well, the Yonkin, that was spud in October of 2023. And this doesn't tell when it came on production. Now, you can pull up a cumulative report of the Yonkin well, and you can see when it first came on production in relation to that spud date. And then you can also see how that production maintained over that time. And what I've been seeing on any of these wells that I've looked up is, you know, where you used to see a 50% decline the first year, 50% again the next year. And like in the case of some of the older wells, they'll taper off and then continue producing at maybe 10% of original production. But what we're seeing is those levels are staying at they're staying high. And I know there was a point where companies kind of thought, well, maybe it's not good to produce it for all it's worth initially, to sustain that over a longer period of time, the high production. So I'm not an expert in that, but we have seen that we're getting those high rates and they're not dropping off a cliff like they used to. Lots of questions by the same person. Is it the, and I think this person is testing me and he's probably laughing where he's sitting right now. Is it the Cherry Valley limestone between the layers? And it's very possible that it is. I believe a Purcell for Cherry Valley limestone. Maybe that's something I can talk about in the future, what those actual layers are. And I believe, I hope I didn't miss any, that those are the only 2 questions, but I appreciate that. And so if there are no other questions with that, I'm going to call it a day on this webcast. I hope you found it interesting. And again, since you're a subscriber, you'll get a notice when I'll be doing the next one, and probably at least in the next month, but most likely not every week unless something really interesting pops up. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.